Picture this. You've been with someone for about 2 years. You know their cereal brand. You know the face they make when a movie disappoints them. You've said, "I love you" so many times, it's almost become part of the background noise of your relationship, like a light left on in a room you both pass through. And yet, there's this invisible gap between you two that you can't quite close. You reach, they receive it politely. Then they retreat, just slightly, back behind something you can't see but can absolutely feel. And the scary part isn't that they seem cold. It's that in the right moments, they're incredibly warm, thoughtful, present, and then suddenly they're not. And you find yourself replaying everything you said, wondering if you pushed too hard, asked for too much, needed too openly. If any of that is familiar, this video is for you. Because here's something most relationship content completely skips over. For someone with avoidant attachment, "I love you" can quietly activate the exact thing you're trying to prevent. Not because love isn't wanted, but because of the specific way the avoidant nervous system was shaped. Those 3 words often carry a frequency the avoidant partner's system reads as threat, not comfort. So what actually gets through? That's what we're unpacking today. 3 specific phrases, the psychology behind why they work, and what this all tells us about the deeper mechanics of avoidant attachment. Let's go. Why the most common love language misses the mark. Before we get to the 3 phrases, we need to lay the groundwork. Because if you skip this part, the phrases will feel like tricks. They're not. They're the natural output of understanding how avoidant attachment actually works. Avoidant attachment, whether on the dismissive end or the fearful end, doesn't appear out of nowhere. It forms early, usually in response to a caregiving environment that was inconsistent, emotionally unavailable, or subtly punishing a vulnerability. We're not necessarily talking about dramatic trauma. Sometimes it's quieter than that. A parent who checked all the practical boxes but went cold when the kid got emotional. A household where feelings were treated like inconveniences. A dynamic where love felt conditional, given when the child performed correctly and withheld when they didn't. The child's brain does exactly what it's supposed to do. It adapts. It learns that emotional expression doesn't produce safety. It produces discomfort, or worse, withdrawal from the people they depend on. So, the child starts internalizing, goes quiet when things are hard, figures things out alone, builds a self-concept around independence, because independence stopped being a choice and became a survival tool. That wiring doesn't disappear when the child becomes an adult and falls in love with you. Here's what most people miss, and this is the thing that changes how you see avoidant behavior entirely. And you say, "I love you" to someone with this attachment history, their conscious mind may hear affection, but the nervous system underneath, it can hear obligation. It hears, "I have given you something significant, and now there is an emotional debt between us." Or it hears, "My need for you is increasing, and that terrifies me." Or even, "You will eventually require me to be emotionally open in ways I don't know how to be, and that will end badly." Think about that. You are leading with your heart, and their system is reading it as an incoming risk. This is not a character flaw. This is not them being unfeeling or broken or unworthy of love. This is a nervous system running software it installed in childhood to keep itself safe. And the only way to update that software isn't through more love. It's through a different kind of consistency. A language that works with the avoidant nervous system instead of inadvertently triggering it. That's what these 3 phrases do. Phrase 1. "I've got you." On the surface, this sounds gentle but unremarkable. Dig 1 layer deeper, and you'll see why it lands differently than almost anything else you can say. At the core of most avoidant attachment patterns is a wound that doesn't always have a name. It's a bone-deep belief, usually unconscious, that when things fall apart, they'll be dealing with it alone. Not because they're pessimistic, because that was simply the pattern. Go to the people who are supposed to be your anchor when things get hard, and they're either not there or not able to hold what you're carrying. So you stop going. You build the capacity to anchor yourself, because that's the only anchor that proved reliable. As an adult, this shows up as the partner who goes quiet during stress instead of reaching out, who handles bad news with strange efficiency instead of letting themselves fall apart, who pushes back when you try to help, not because they don't want support, but because accepting it requires admitting they need someone, and that particular admission feels like stepping off a ledge. Here's where "I've got you" operates differently than anything that sounds like help. Consider the difference between "let me know if you need anything" and "I've got you." The first one, however kind, still puts the ball in their court. It requires them to reach out, to ask, to be vulnerable on purpose. For an avoidant person, that step, the reaching out, is exactly the step that feels most dangerous. They've spent their life learning not to take it. "I've got you" skips that step entirely. It doesn't ask them to reach. It doesn't require them to be vulnerable first. It simply says, "The net is here. Whether you use it or not is entirely up to you." No ask, no expectation, no string on the other end. And here's the nuance of timing. You don't say this in the middle of a heavy relationship conversation. You say it sideways, when they mention something stressful at work, almost in passing, when you notice they have been quieter than usual, when they're clearly carrying something they haven't brought to you. You say it lightly, without ceremony, and then you let it sit. "I've got you." For a nervous system that has always braced to handle things alone, that quiet statement is not small. It is, in fact, one of the more radical things another person can offer. Phrase 2. No pressure. Stay with me on this one, because I know how it might sound, weak maybe, or overly accommodating. But the psychology behind it is actually quite precise. Every relationship runs on an invisible emotional economy. When you want something from your partner, closeness, reassurance, conversation, presence, and you don't get it, something accumulates. Sometimes it's conscious resentment. Often it's subtler than that. A slight shift in tone. A comment that sounds offhand but isn't. A silence that carries weight. Most people aren't even aware they're doing it. Avoidant people feel when this before it becomes visible. This is something that surprises a lot of people. Avoidants are often described as emotionally checked out, but they're actually remarkably attuned to emotional undercurrents. They just respond to those undercurrents by withdrawing rather than engaging. The moment they sense that someone needs something from them, the system flags it. Obligation incoming. And the response is to create distance. Now imagine the cycle this creates with an anxious attachment style, which is the most common pairing, by the way. The anxious partner wants more connection, so they move forward. The avoidant partner senses the pull and steps back. The anxious partner feels the withdrawal and reaches harder. The avoidant partner, now feeling the pressure intensify, retreats further. Neither person is doing anything wrong in isolation. The pattern itself is the problem. No pressure, used genuinely, interrupts that cycle. Say your partner has gone quiet. Maybe they've been distant for a few days. You miss them. What most people do is reach in a way that telegraphs their need. "Can we talk?" Or, "You've been distant lately. Is something wrong?" Or worse, silence that's loaded with expectation. All of those moves, however justified, add weight to the scale. Instead, "Hey, just wanted to say I'm thinking about you. No pressure. No need to respond to this. Just wanted you to know." What you've done there is offer connection that doesn't require them to perform anything in return. There's no debt created, no expectation sitting on the other side of the message. Just, "I exist. You exist. I notice you. And you don't owe me a particular response to that." For an avoidant partner, that kind of message, especially if it's consistent and genuinely free of hidden agenda, begins to rewire what connection feels like. It starts to feel less like a demand and more like a door that's open, but doesn't close if they don't walk through it immediately. One important note here, this only works if you actually mean it. If you send no pressure with a clenched jaw, and then stew when they don't respond, you haven't actually offered freedom. You've just disguised the pressure in different packaging. Avoidant people will feel that distinction immediately. The practice here is genuine, and that means doing your own work around tolerating uncertainty in the relationship, which is hard. But that's also what makes it real. Phrase 3. I respect that. Of all 3 phrases, this one might be doing the heaviest psychological lifting. Here's a pattern that plays out constantly in relationships with avoidant partners. And it's subtle enough that most people don't even notice they're doing it. The avoidant person states a need. They want a night to themselves. They're not ready to have a particular conversation. They need to dial back plans because they're overwhelmed. And their partner says, okay, totally fine. But then something happens. There's a sigh, a tightness around the eyes, a comment the next morning that's technically unrelated but clearly isn't. Or they agree but then send 3 check-in texts during the night, which communicates that okay was conditional. Or they're fine in the moment and then bring it up later as evidence of the avoidant partner always needing space. The boundary was respected in letter but penalized in spirit. Avoidant people track this, not in a scorekeeping petty way, but because their nervous system is always running a background check on whether it's safe to be honest about what they need. And every time a stated need gets quietly punished, the system records, expressing what I actually want creates friction, so they stop expressing it. They either comply against their own grain and grow resentful, or they stop saying anything and you wonder why you feel like you can never quite reach them. I respect that, followed by actual behavior that matches those words, is the antidote. When your partner says they need to be alone for a few hours and you say, I respect that, take your time, and then you genuinely give them that time without withdrawing your own warmth when they come back, something begins to shift. They realize that honesty about their needs doesn't come with a penalty, that they don't have to manage your feelings in order to take care of their own, that the relationship can hold both of you without one of you having to disappear. This connects to something that sits at the very center of avoidant attachment, the fear of engulfment, the terror that a relationship will slowly dissolve their sense of self, that they'll have to become someone different, smaller, more available, less autonomous, in order to keep the peace. That fear is why they guard so hard. When you consistently respect their boundaries without resentment, you are directly addressing that fear. You're demonstrating, not through words, but through repeated behavior, that being with you doesn't require them to give up who they are. And that is the foundation that allows an avoidant person to actually choose closeness. Not because they're obligated, not because they're afraid of losing you, but because being close to you stopped feeling like a threat to everything they've worked to protect. The thread that runs through all 3. You probably notice something these 3 phrases have in common. None of them are declarations. None of them make a claim about how you feel or what you need. All 3 of them are fundamentally about creating conditions, not making demands. Most conventional relationship advice operates on the assumption that love is communicated through expression. Say it louder, say it more often, show it in bigger ways. And for many attachment styles, that logic works. But avoidant attachment doesn't respond to amplitude. It responds to temperature, specifically to warmth that doesn't spike, that doesn't overwhelm, that just stays steady and doesn't ask to be met in equal measure. Think about how a cat behaves around someone who desperately wants to pet it versus someone who just sits quietly in the room. The person who wants it reaches toward it, makes eye contact, moves closer. The cat leaves. The person who sits quietly and lets the cat make the first move often ends up with the cat in their lap within 20 minutes. I know comparing your partner to a cat sounds slightly ridiculous, but the behavioral psychology is actually quite similar. The avoidant nervous system approaches connection the way a cautious animal approaches something unfamiliar, slowly, on its own timeline, only when it doesn't feel cornered. I've got you creates safety. No pressure removes obligation. I respect that protects autonomy. Together, they communicate something no single declaration of love can. I am not a threat to who you are. You are safe here, and I can sustain that, whether or not you meet me at every turn. That message, delivered through consistent behavior, not just careful phrasing, is what gradually teaches the avoidant nervous system that closeness doesn't have to cost them anything. And once that lesson starts to land, real intimacy becomes possible, not performed, not obligated, but chosen. One more thing before we close. There's a version of this video that ends with you feeling like you've been handed a toolkit to finally crack your avoidant partner open. That's not what this is. Using these phrases as manipulation tactics, saying the right thing while internally seething with expectation, won't work. Avoidant people have spent their lives becoming highly skilled at detecting the gap between what someone says and what they actually mean. The phrases only land when they're real, which means the actual work here is internal. It means building enough security in yourself that you can genuinely offer space without feeling like you're abandoning the relationship. It means untangling your own attachment patterns, figuring out where your need for constant reassurance comes from, and starting to tend to that independently. It means accepting that healing in an avoidant partner is slow, non-linear, and sometimes looks like nothing is happening right up until the moment something quietly but definitively changes. Nadia, who'd been in an on-again, off-again relationship with an avoidant partner for 4 years, said, "The turning point wasn't a conversation or a breakthrough moment. It was 3 months of her consistently meaning what she said, of saying, 'I've got you,' and then not following it up with a list of ways he needed to receive that, of saying no pressure, and then genuinely going about her own evening when he went quiet, of saying, 'I respect that,' without a trace of the sigh she used to let out. She said he showed up one Saturday morning with coffee and just sat down next to her and said, 'I feel like I can breathe around you.' That was his version of a declaration. That was him arriving. Some people are worth that kind of patience, and some situations are not. And that's also real, and you get to evaluate that honestly. No framework about attachment styles is a reason to stay somewhere you're consistently hurting. Understand the pattern, yes, but also understand yourself in it. But if your person is worth it, if you believe what's underneath the distance is someone who genuinely wants to be there but doesn't yet know how to stay, then start with the language. Change the frequency. Stop trying to break through the wall and start making the wall feel unnecessary instead. Say, 'I've got you,' when they're carrying something alone. Say, 'No pressure,' when you can feel them pulling back. Say, 'I respect that,' when they're brave enough to tell you what they need. And mean all of it. That's the whole thing, really. Mean it. Because love that makes someone feel safe, that asks nothing in return for simply existing, is the loudest thing you can say to someone who has spent their life waiting for the other shoe to drop. It just doesn't always sound like, 'I love you.' Sometimes it sounds like exhaling, like finally putting something down, like sitting in a room with someone and realizing, quietly and without fanfare, that you don't feel like you have to perform anything to deserve being there. That's the love avoidant people have been waiting for. That's what these words are reaching toward. And if you're the avoidant person watching, the one who recognized themselves in all of this, the fact that you stayed through the whole thing matters. That's not nothing. That's you trying. And trying, even quietly, even alone in front of a screen, at whatever time of night this is for you, that is its own kind of reaching out. You are allowed to be loved in a way that doesn't feel like a trap,